Hello everyone, and welcome back to the 1972 World Chess Championship match between Robert James Fischer and Boris Spassky. Now, if you've been with us so far, you know that 7 games have already been played. Well, 7 games are counted as being played, 6 games have actually been played, and the result is 4-3 in Fischer's favor. So again, Fischer has the white pieces, and it's very interesting. Will Fischer open with the usual e4, or will he once again switch to something not standard for him? And it's very interesting, as the title of the video suggests, marble or wood. It refers to before game 7, so for the previous round. Fischer sent an official letter, and it was a really well written letter to the official arbiter Lothar Schmidt, where he requested that the marble chessboard be switched with the wooden one that was used in the backstage for their game 3. Schmidt said, okay, I have to ask Spassky if he's okay with that. And since Spassky wasn't really having the greatest time in this match, he said, yeah, sure, no problem. He immediately said it was okay to switch to the wooden board, as, you know, he really doesn't care. And if it makes Fischer happy, okay, why not? So game 7 was played again on the wooden board, and now, again, before game 8, Fischer requests that the board be switched to the marble board because it is against the rules to switch the board during the match, because if they agreed from the beginning to play on a certain board, then it is not allowed to switch the boards once again. And Chief Arbiter Lothar Schmidt had to go through tournament regulations and match regulations, and he found out that there was indeed an Article 18 which says that if the players already agreed upon a chessboard of marble, then the entire match has to be played out on a marble chessboard. So it seems that Fischer knew this, and he still decided to troll Schmidt and Spassky also. But okay, for this game 8, Lothar Schmidt could not locate Spassky before the game, so the game is still being played on a wooden chessboard and not on a marble one. So that being said, I thought it was a very nice story, but let's get back to this one. And one of the reasons Fischer requested that they switch to the wooden chessboard was because the squares on a marble chessboard appeared to be bigger. The light squares appeared to be bigger than the dark squares. So a very nice story. But okay, we are back to game 8, and Fischer opens again with c4, so not his standard e4. And if you remember in that epic game 6 where Fischer first opened with c4, Spassky went for this slow e6 move. Here Spassky immediately goes for c5, and he wants to fight for the center. Knight to c3, knight to c6, knight to f3, and here Spassky did spend some time to decide whether he want to go e6, maybe g6, but in the end he decided to go knight to f6, so the 4 knights variation of the English, a nice symmetrical position. We have g3, g6, bishop to g2, bishop to g7, and we have castles, d4, and here Spassky could play something like d6 to go more into this symmetrical stuff, but rather he goes c captures on d4. We have knight captures on d4, and now knight captures on d4, allowing this queen to be centralized, but it will be on a somewhat unpleasant square since the bishop is also eyeing the d4 square. Also very interesting and definitely should be mentioned is the move d6. A very nice move, preparing to develop the dark square bishop, but it comes with the idea of sacrificing one pawn. So how does it work? Well, after knight captures, pawn captures, and bishop captures, black can go bishop to h3, attacking white's rook. And after white captures the rook on a8, now comes queen captures on a8, threatening checkmate, so white would have to prevent this with f3. And after f3, bishop captures, king captures. Yes, black did achieve some problems here for white, and the king is somewhat loose, but still it's not considered to be an enough compensation for the extra pawn that white has. So okay, after knight to d4, Spassky captures immediately. We have knight captures, queen captures on d4, and then now comes d6. And okay, we have bishop to g5. And this is already a very nice position for Fischer, as this move has hasn't been played before. In this position, after d6, moves like queen to d3 have been played, and Spassky and his teammates, of course, covered many of the games that were played in this fashion. But instead of this queen to d3 move, bishop to g5 was never played. And what is Fischer's idea here? Fischer's idea is that he wants to achieve some weakening of Spassky's king side. For example, with h6, then he wants to retreat with the bishop, and then, for example, with bishop to e3 and queen to d2, attack the h6 pawn. Spassky doesn't go for this. Instead, he goes for bishop to e6. It's an idea. He wants to keep an eye on the d5 square. You can't have any useful discoveries with this knight, even though the bishop is eyeing the queen. So here Spassky first defends the d5 square. Now knight to d5 is definitely an idea, opening up an attack against Fischer's queen from the bishop, and then go for some further exchanges. Here Fischer plays queen to f4, and this move really came as a surprise to Spassky, and it really shook him, as Spassky spent over an hour here. Now it's a very nice idea. The queen is no longer here, so there are no discoveries to be made. You still can't play h6 because, well, now the h6 is very nicely covered. So what do you do here? Here, after spending over an hour, Spassky played queen to a5. He decided he wants to put the pressure on the queen side. His idea is to play rook to b8, a6, b5, crack this open, and have a lot of pressure here on the queen side. Instead of this queen to a5 move, one other possibility is actually rook to a8, rook to c8. This is an engine line, but still, it's sometimes very nice to see how engines make very difficult positions seem quite obvious. The idea is rook to c8. Now, with a double attack against the c4 pawn. After you defend it, b3, now comes knight to g4. And now this knight to g4 is a very powerful move, because it opens up an attack against the c3 knight, which is undefended, but also now the knight is guarding the h6 square. So h6 is the threat, as the bishop has nowhere to go. You would have to go to h4. So now you cannot protect the knight with rook to c1. You have to go back with the queen. Queen here, and now after bishop captures, queen captures, now you go b5. The rook is already on c8. Very, very nice idea by the engine. So yeah, just putting it out there. But okay, after queen to f4, Spassky went queen to a5, also a very nice move. Rook a to c1. Fischer now defends the c3 knight, and he prepares to further protect the c4 pawn by playing b3. Rook a to b8. Spassky has to protect the b7 pawn. So far, it wasn't really worth it for Fischer to capture it, but now he actually could capture it. So now a6, b5 is definitely an idea. Fischer plays b3 as planned, protecting the c4 pawn. And now the situation on the clock is Fischer spent some 30 minutes on the clock, and Spassky already spent an hour and a half. So here Spassky has less than half an hour to make 27 more moves to reach time control, as this is only move 13 in the game. So very impressive. Already Spassky was also very impressed by this, as Fischer is playing c4, you know, and he's throwing novelties around like he's a master c4 player. Rook f to c8, developing the other rook, and here comes queen back to d2. Again, Fischer now goes back from his plan of something like bishop to h6, and he brings the queen over to help out with the center and with the queen side. We have a6, Spassky simply prepares b5, and now another move that comes as a surprise to Spassky. Fischer goes bishop back to e3. Seems like a very weird move to play, but it actually prevents Spassky's next move without Spassky even realizing it. Here you can't allow your rooks to be next to each other like this. You have to move the rook to e8. But Spassky didn't think much of this move, and he was already very much low on the clock. So here Spassky played b5. He simply continued with his plan, but there is something very wrong with this b5 move, so feel free to pause the video here and try to find the move Spassky missed. So what did Fischer play? Here I'll give you a couple of seconds for you to decide. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. It is not an easy move to find. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the idea is bishop to a7. Now that you see it, of course, it becomes very simple because you see the light square bishop is slicing all the way to a8, and the rook cannot use the light squares, and the bishop is simply controlling all of the dark squares, so here Spassky loses the exchange. There's no point in trying to save the rook. B captures on c4 was played. We have bishop captures on b8, rook captures on b8, and now pawn captures on c4. Bishop captures on c4 by Spassky, and now rook f to d1, preparing to push the e pawn. And here Spassky should continue with something like queen to e5 to centralize his queen, or like Gligorich suggests, he should go king to f8. But blundering the exchange like this, Spassky didn't think that much about this position anymore, and he really didn't have any compensation for. Okay, he does have the bishop pair, but you do need more than this to show off with your bishop pair. Here Spassky played knight to d7. He wants to create some threats here and also bring his knight over into the game, but this move is yet again a blunder on Spassky's part. So feel free to pause the video once again and find the idea behind this move. I'll give you a little hint. The bishop on c4 is undefended, and also the queen on a5 is undefended. So having this information, feel free to find the move that wins the game for white. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations. Spassky missed this, but you are an excellent player, and you are not stressed out about everything Fischer does, and so on and so on. So the move is knight to d5, and now you see that the bishop is under attack. Rook captures bishop is a threat. Also the queen is under attack. Queen captures queen is a threat. And here there's really no good move. Only good move is to capture the queen. But now white has this in-between move, a nice Zwischenzug. Knight captures on e7 with check. King to f8, and only now rook captures on d2. So the queens are exchanged, but you are already up the exchange. Now you have also grabbed the pawn. It doesn't really matter if you move the bishop, the knight will safely get out of harm's way. So after rook to d2, Spassky played king captures, and now comes rook captures on c4. So now not only is Fischer up the exchange, but also Spassky doesn't have his extra pawn anymore. So rook to b1 with check. Okay, we have bishop to f1 and now knight to c5. Spassky will still try to create some problems for Fischer. King to g2. We have a5 now. Spassky does have some chances if he is somehow able to get rid of this a2 pawn and perhaps do something with his own passed a pawn. We have e4. Bishop to a1. Spassky wants to get his bishop into the game before pushing f6 to prevent Fischer's e5. So f4, we have f6 as planned, and now rook to e2. King to e6, now comes rook e to c2. Doubling up on the c file, rook to bishop to b1, to b2, preventing rook to c1, and now comes bishop to e2. We have h5 by Spassky, rook to d2. Bishop to a3, and now f5. This comes with check, g captures on f5, pawn captures on f5, and king to e5. You cannot capture on c5 on f5 because rook captures on c5. A very nasty idea. Now after you capture, bishop to d3 checks the king and also picks up the rook on b1. So this would be very unfortunate for Spassky. But everything after those two blunders is very unfortunate for Spassky. King to e5 was played, now comes rook c to d4. King to captures on f5, and now rook to d5 with check. King moves, now comes rook captures on d6 with check. King to e7, and after rook to c6 here, Spassky decided that there was no point in continuing this game as he is simply down too much, and he decided to resign the game. He's going to lose the h5 pawn, and then it's simply push to win. So yeah, this is game 8 of the 1972 World Chess Championship match between Robert James Fischer and Boris Vasilyevich Spassky. I do hope you enjoyed it. Spassky definitely didn't, so it's hard to say. And it's very interesting, although when Spassky and his seconds, when they talk about the games and the match, and when they recall everything, they weren't all that bothered by these silly requests Fischer had. I mean, Spassky couldn't care less if he played on a marble board or on a wooden board. He just wanted to play chess, but something was off. Something just wasn't right. So yeah, Fischer is now in the lead 5-3, and it will be now very hard for Spassky to catch up. But we'll check up on what happens with Game 9 very soon and continue this very nice story. I would like to thank Brian Carey, Carmen Mears, Lawrence Buttin, Ronald Petit, and Danny McCullough for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check all my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon. Continuing the Bobby Fischer series, but also I will check up on some of your suggestions if there were any, and I believe there were. So thank you all, and I'll see you soon.